Good morning everyone. This is Saurabh from OpenSpecimen, and today I'm going to show you how to develop a workflow from the scratch. So this video will be divided into two parts. The first part will be focused on the different components of the workflow, and the second part we will demonstrate you how to create your workflow from the scratch. So let's start. The major two components of the workflow are workflow.json file and multiple JavaScript files. The JSON file acts as a skeleton framework for the workflow. In this file, we'll define the order of the task that we need to see in our workflow. It has multiple properties and attributes which will go in details. So the JSON file have the name attribute which will be unique across the system. This represents the unique identifier for the workflow, and as I said, it will be unique across the system. The second part is the title. The title of the workflow will be what it is displayed on the UI. The next is the sort code. The sort code will later be used in creating the batch name using the instant name format. Now moving to the input type. So the input type defines what type of input the workflow will receive in the start. So if the input is the participant, we have to define the value as CPR. If the input is visits, then we have to define the value as visit, and if the input is specimens, then we have to define the value as specimens. Now the next component is the CP and the rules. So based on these two components, CPs and the rules, the waiting queue of the workflow is triggered. So the CPs component, in the CPs component, we define the list of the collection protocols that we want to use for the workflow. If we do not define any collection protocol, then workflow can be used for all the collection protocol in the OpenSpecimen. Similarly, the rules section defines the criteria for the specimens to be fulfilled before processing inside the workflow. If there is no criteria, then all the specimen can be processed within the workflow. Now, as I said, based on these two criteria, the specimens which fulfill both of these criteria, CPs and the rules, will be shown in the waiting queue for that workflow. Now coming to the notification user group. So these are the group of people which will receive the email notification when there is specimen in the waiting queue. Now coming to the next component of the JSON section, that is the task. So inside the task section, we will going to define all the tasks that we need in our workflow, and this task section has its sub properties such as type, name, title, and etc. So within this task section, we are going to define all the tasks that we needed, and each task can have different types, and we can define these types based on our requirement and all. So all these types that are supported in the workflow are provided in our wiki page. You can go and check. For example, few examples of these types are update specimen task to update the specimen, form task to perform the form data entry for specimen event and specimen forms, and etc. Now coming to the name and title, it is similar to the workflow JSON name and title, but it is specific for the task. So the name component should be unique within the workflow, and the title should be the title of that task. Now if there is further more information about the task that you want to add, you can add it under short description and long descriptions. Now moving ahead, the furthermore components of the task section are task starter. So this defines if the task is the first task of the workflow or not. If it is a first task, the value will always be true, and if it is not the first task, then all the value is always going to be false. Now the next component is the optional and on skip. If your task is a mandatory task, then this value will be false. If your task is not a mandatory task and it can be skipped while processing the specimen, then it should be true. And once we set this value as optional value as true, once we set a task as optional, then we need to define the on skip action. So when skipping the task, what should be the action? Should it copy the input of the specimen, the input of the earlier task to the next task, or it should skip all the task for that specimen? So that we can define using the on skip action. The next components are the inputs. So this inputs is usually empty for the first task, and for the following task it should be added based on your requirement. So for example, the input for the second task will be the first task, the input for the third task will be the second task, and so on. Now user groups and notification users are the group of users who will have access to the workflow defined under the user groups, and notify users are the group of people who will receive the notification once the task is finished. Now these are the components of the workflow.json file. Let's see what is the JavaScript file, and we'll discuss about those components as well. Now the JavaScript file represents the task specific settings that needs to be carried out in the specimen. So it can be setting the default values, or it can be setting different fields for that task. Let's see its properties and attributes for the JavaScript file. So the JavaScript file supports the properties such as default, where we are setting the default value for different fields. Field section, where we are providing the list of fields that we want to see in this task. And inside the field section, there are subsections, sub properties such as name, label, type, sort time, and etc. The name properties defines the name property defines the field that you are showing in that task. For example, if you want to show the label of your specimen, then you will write specimen.label. If you want to show the quantity of your specimen, then you write specimen.quantity dot available quantity. Similarly, the type property defines what is the type of that field. So if it is a drop down, we'll set it as drop down. If it is a text field, we'll set it as text field, and if it is a number field, we'll set the value as number field. All those supported information is already given in our wiki page, so you can go and check. You can add furthermore information such as validation and copy first to all button using the below configuration as shown here. Now this is all about the configuration of the workflow. In the next video, we'll see how to configure the workflow from how to create a workflow from the scratch.